Okay. Hi, Maya.
Hello, Sandra.
How are you?
I'm great, and you?
I'm great. I'm great. So we're live. People can see us now. So we're live tonight. It's a pleasure to host another session with you. واليوم نحن we're testing a new platform for Sira. This is the whole month is for testing, dedicated for testing. فيلي عم يسمعونا بيهمنا كتير رأيكم تنشوف إذا البلاتفورم هينة إذا منكفي عليها كمان. So your feedback is very important. قبل ما نبلش نحكي عن السيشن تبع الليلة ونعرف ليلي ما بيعرفوا مايا بس بدنا نقول لكم كم شغلة. So نحن هلأ لايف وعم نسجل. ما بنقدر نعرف who are the attendees. اوكي سو ما بنعرف اساميكم بالتسجيل، ما بتبينوا الا اذا سالتوا اسئله باسمكم. So make sure when you ask questions يلي ما بده يبين اسمه بالريكوردينج في option انه يسال السؤال anonymously. اوكي نحن هلا during this round table الطريقه يلي فيكم تتفاعلوا معنا هي through the question and answer through Q&A. ما فيكم تحكونا لايف، ما فينا نسمعكم، ما فيكم تطلعوا على فيديو. تقريبا رح نقضي بالراوند تيبل around 40 to 45 minutes. مايا رح تشرح عن الموضوع تبع الليله، ناخذ منكم اسئله on the chat ليلي عنده اسئله، ومن بعدها منوقف الريكوردينج ومننقل على الروم. اوكي منبطل براوند تيبل ومننقل على الروم. بقلب الروم فيكم تطلعوا على الكاميرا وتحكونا لايف وتحكوا وتاخذوا مايكروفون كمان اللي ما بده يبين صورته في يحكينا، وفيكم تسالونا كمان اسئله on the chat inside the room. اوكي وبالروم اكيد ما في ريكوردينج، سو فور فول برايفسي رح يبين اساميكم، فيكم تطلعوا على الكاميرا وما رح نعمل ولا ريكوردينج. So this is the only place where we record. Why we are recording؟ تقدروا ترجعوا تحضروا السيشنز بعدين. So ابتداء من الليله من بعد ما نخلص بيصير فيكم ترجعوا تحضروا سيشن اليوم، هيك يلي قفى شقفه بيقدر يرجع لها كمان، وفيكم ترجعوا لسيشنز قديمه كمان بذات الطريقه. كمان بالبلاتفورم في شغلتين جداد منحب اذا بتقدروا كمان تو اكسبلور ذم. اول شغله هي الصالون، وين كنا موجودين انا ومايا قبل السيشن. بالصالون هي كانه صالون اوضه قعده وبنقعد هونيك، سو فيكم تقعدوا انتم كمان وتحكوا معنا ونتساير سوا. ونحن throughout the month بشهر ايار رح يكون عندنا different psychologists واكسبرتس وثيرابيست قاعدين بالصالون تنقدر نحكي معكم بمواضيع برات السيشنز. سو اذا عندكم حيلا سؤال رح نقول لكم اي اوقات بنكون موجودين فيها تتفوتوا تسالوا اسئلتكم تقدروا تحكوا معنا. سو بالصالون بتفتحوا معنا فويس وفيديو اذا بدكم. كمان شغله فيتشر جديده بالبلاتفورم هي اللايبراري. سو بتفوتوا وبتقشعوا بلوجز تبعنا، فيديوز، any recommendation of books, articles بنحطهم. so always check out كمان اللايبراري section. ما رح طول بقى عليكم. مايا أهلا وسهلا. مايا she's one of the pillars of Sira. It's always a pleasure to have you. Maya is a clinical psychologist وكمان she's a life coach, certified coach واختصاصها هو adolescents و adults ضمن إطار الفاميلي ثيرابي. without any further delay مايا إذا بتحبي تبلشي ويلا wish you luck. I will be monitoring for Q&A all throughout.
Perfect. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for the introduction and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. I'm very excited to be with Sira. Ever since I've joined you, it's been a pleasure. What you're doing is amazing. Definitely the region or everywhere in the world, globally, we need things like we need platforms like Sira to help raise awareness, to help normalize all these topics that you bring up. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you. As a mom and as a psychologist and a life coach, it's added value in every single way. It's added so much into my life. So thank you so much for having me here. Welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. بعرف إنه it's late, and I hope your children are tucked in bed quietly, or at least gave you some time for yourself tonight. قبل ما بلش خليني بس شوي أعرف على حالي. I know Sandra already did, but just briefly. اسمي مايا حوا. I am as Sandra said, a psychologist from the University of Houston, graduate of the University of Houston. My specialty is CBT. I'm also certified by the Aaron Bex Institute as a CBT therapist. I'm a life and executive coach from the ICF. My niche is youth, parenting, and family. And بشتغل كل شيء under the umbrella of family, from couples to parenting to the child themselves. I'm also certified from Cornell University in the psychology of leadership. بس أحلى title بقدر لكم إياها هو I'm a mother of 3 children. 2 of them are 17, 14, and 11. So I have 2 teenagers and 10, sorry, not 11. It gives me great pleasure being here as a parent and as a coach and a psychologist to be able to talk about this very hot topic, how to talk to your teens about sex. بعرف إنه كلكم قبل ما تفوتوا اليوم على السيشن عم تسألوا حالكم إنه قد إيه هيدي التوبيك مهمة وكل يوم نسأل حالنا هذا السؤال. It's an extremely important topic, and it's extremely important to be able to understand what we're talking about. As Sandra said, I will be talking and just giving you some brief information today for 45 minutes. بعدين I would be very interested to hear your comments, your questions, anything that you might want to share. وأكيد you can reach out privately through email, through WhatsApp, through Instagram, or whatever platform you choose to talk to me individually if you have any concerns or personal questions that you want to share with me. To start, a little bit about what we're going to do today. رح نحكي شوي عن what is the talk, the birds and the bees. كنا قبل نحكي the talk. There was a idea before that was called the talk. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what it means today and how to deal with it. We're going to talk about how to get comfortable with the topic yourself. لأنه as parents, the most important and vital part of parenting is before we approach anything with our children is to actually get comfortable ourselves with the topic. I'm going to give you some brief facts. I'm going to tell you what teens say, whether it be what we read about, what research says, what I've heard in my office, what I've heard parents say, and what I've heard teens say in response to that. But then نحكي شوي, which is the question I get all the time. وين ما بكون? When do I start talking, Maya? أكترية الأهل بيسألوني طب when do I know when to start talking? This is a big question that a lot of us parents have today. Who should talk? كمان a very important question that I get from parents and teens and wherever I am, whether it be socially or in my office, I get that question, إنه مين بيحكي مع الأولاد? And then, like I said, we'll open it up to questions at the end. It's not about the talk, it's about talks. And why do I say that? لأنه هلا as we go through the workshop, you're going to understand, or I'm going to make it a little bit clearer about how important it is that وقت ما نكون عم نحكي عن sex or sexuality or identity or who they are as children and relationships and love and emotions and everything that has to do with relationships when it comes to talking to our teens, it is not just a one-time talk. Why? Because when we make it a one-time talk, we create a lot of taboos around it. We create a lot of questions. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable for us and for our teens. So when it's just a one-time talk, we tend to denormalize it. We take away from making it something that we should be talking about openly with our children and communicating openly. And is حاضرين any of my workshops before, or you've talked to me on an individual level, you know how much I value the importance of communication. Communication is a pillar of every relationship we build in our lives. And as parents, it's very important that we create a foundation with our children based on communication. So whenever we have continuous talks about the topic of sex or sexuality with our children or with our teens, we create a more open dialogue with our children. We allow them to know that we are the come-to person, the go-to person, no matter what it is, no matter what question they have, no matter what they heard, what they saw. The more we talk just one time, we just خلص, نوصل المessage, they receive it the way they want. When we talk to children, we talk, they listen. We say something, they hear something completely different. So when it's a one-time talk, عم نحكي نحن شو بدنا, coming from an uncomfortable and awkward place as parents, and we create more awkwardness with the children on the topic of sex. So whenever we want to talk about sex, it's extremely important to have numerous talks continuously from a very young age all the way up to adulthood. I know this is a workshop, and a lot of you parents, from what I understood from Sandra, are parents of teens, but I am going to talk briefly about how early we can start talking and how do we start talking to our children. How to get comfortable. The first and most important thing when it comes to communicating with our children is whatever it is we want to communicate, whatever message we're trying to relay to our children, it's extremely important that we're comfortable with it. إذا نحن بنيجي بنقعد مع أولادنا ومنا نحن مرتاحين بالتوبيك أما منا مرتاحين بشو عم نحكي مع أولادنا, children will sense that and they'll create an uncomfortable feeling towards it. So they won't be able to come to us. They'll feel uncomfortable talking to us about it or coming to us about it. So it's very important that you establish a good relationship with your children when it comes to your comfort level. Yani communication should be ongoing. And when I say communication, I'm not talking about, I get a lot of parents who tell me, Maya, I do quality time with my children. I sit with my children individually. How do I create that communication with my children? It's by building a good relationship, by making them understand that they can tell us anything. They can say everything to us. Focus on healthy relationships. It's very important that we don't put so much focus on the actual sex itself, but on relationships. What is a healthy relationship? What does it entail? The more we talk about just sex when it comes to sex education, educating our children with sexual, their sex, their life with sex, or their relationship with sex, then we put too much emphasis on that. We need to create or go about talking about sex, focusing on relationships, how to build good relationships, what it means to have a good relationship, instead of just talking about sex itself. Be open and honest. And this is very important, that you actually sit with yourself as a parent individually and think about how much can you really talk about this? How comfortable are you to talk about this? Don't forget, guys, our generation and our parents' generation, this was not a topic that was, for the most part, openly spoken about within our homes, especially in our region. It was something that was maybe talked about before marriage, right before we got married. And it was something very brief that we talked about. We didn't know much about it. We weren't educated about it. We learned at school through courses in biology and what have you, what sex is and what the active sex is. But there's more to it. There's relationship building, there's communication. And the more I'm comfortable and I've decided what my level of comfort is and what I want to convey to my children, the more I'm giving them the ability to understand that in their relationships, communication is also important when it comes to their intimacy with their partner later on in life. I need to get comfortable. أنا بدي أعرف حالي أنا شو قادرة أحكي مع أولادي. How comfortable am I to really put that mask down and be able to talk? And how much do I really want to tell them? We have to be very cautious in what we tell our children. And sometimes when we tell children things, we don't want to over-inform them and we don't want to under-inform them. And I'll go through the ages and when and how much to talk at every age with our children. Be prepared for questions. Kids will ask questions. I had a parent once tell me, when I was talking to my children about it and I was trying to be as open as possible and as honest as possible and as comfortable as possible, they asked me, when did you and daddy first have sex? And I wasn't really ready to answer that question. So that in and of itself, just be prepared for any kind of question. حضروا حالكم لأنه الأولاد بيسألونا أسئلة from the age of 5, وتبلشوا يشوفوا a pregnant lady, all the way up to when they're 20, as long as we've created that open stream of communication with them. So be prepared for lots of questions. Get ready to decide what you want to tell them and how much you want to tell them about your personal life with your, growing up. Another very important point that I want to make is, as parents, as the couple, you and your partner, whether it be the father or the mother, both together need to align. You both need to decide, what are our values? What do we want to convey to our children? How much do we want them to understand? Do we align on how we want to convey these messages to our children? Do our values align on what is and what is not acceptable? لأنه إذا الأم عم بتقول شيء والبي عم بيقول شيء ثاني، الولد بضيع، ما بيقعد يعرف حاله وين الكومفورت زون تبعه، ما بيقعد يعرف حاله مع مين لازم يحكي. So it's very important as parents to align and to be as much as possible in collaboration with how much we want to give our children. And both of us need to be as open as possible with our children. Sometimes in couples, one parent or another is more comfortable having these conversations with children, and that's fine. And we'll talk about later who should have the talk and how should it be, depending on the family dynamic. But it's very important that you align on what is and isn't said. It's very important that you align on what is okay and what is not. We have our own beliefs, we have our own values. We do want to convey those to our children. Sex is a very, it's a big topic to a lot of us. And a lot of us tend to take a little bit about from our conditioning, what our parents taught us, what society has taught us. But we also need to keep in mind, guys, that these days are different. Our children, when we were growing up, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have access to all this information that's coming at children. So we need to a little bit adapt, as much as we can adapt to our children's generation, but still hold on to a lot of our values and a lot of our beliefs and what we want to pass on to our children within their norms. We need to be able to align with where they are, where we are, and we kind of meet halfway. أكيد إحنا ما بدنا نغير الvalues تبعونا، ما بدنا نغير البeliefs تبعونا. But at the same time, if our beliefs and our values are too rigid, seeing what our children are and what they're living and what their what their environment is, we're going to push them away from us. So it's very important as parents to align together in what we have. أنا في كتير ولاد بيجوا بيقولوا لي, my dad says this, but then my mom says this. So I'm kind of confused, what is not okay. كتير بيجوا ولاد لعندي بيقولوا لي أنا ما بعرف شيء. Neither of my parents talked to me about it. في كتير ولاد بيجوا بيقولوا لي بعرف كتير من my dad, بعرف ما شيء من my mom, or vice versa. So it's very important that as parents, anything when it comes to parenting is to align as parents and make sure that we are on the same page as parents. Prepare yourself to hear anything. Sometimes because this is, the topic of sex is very uncomfortable for us as parents at times, and some parents deal better with it than others. A lot of times when they actually do sit down to start talking with their children actually start to come out with things, and it shocks the parent. And then that reaction right there will either shut the door or open the door. So how we react to whatever it is they have to tell us. Our children know a lot more than we think they do, guys. So the more welcoming and accepting we are of what they say to us, and the more we approach it with whatever way we want to approach it without going into, a panic mode or becoming angry or just behaving in a way that might shock our children and just kind of close that door of communication. So just be prepared to hear anything, because they will say things to you. I've had parents come and tell me, I was shocked when my 13-year-old told me that they've watched porn online. And I said, you know what, it's okay. You were shocked, you behaved that way. Let's look at it from a different angle. Let's work on it to communicate better with your children. It's very important that we have a non-judgmental and accepting mindset when it comes to parenting. And this is not just on the topic of sex. This is everything: relationships, love, emotions, everything that is, having to do with parenting. It's very important that we always approach any conversation with our children with a non-judgmental mindset. It makes it hard for us. We really need to prepare ourselves that whenever we have talks for our children that might affect their lives later on, okay, they're still young now, but whatever we do now, we build a foundation in what their beliefs are and how they deal with things, how they communicate certain things in their lives. So the more we are non-judgmental and accepting when it comes to whatever it is they might come at us with, the more we allow them to know that this is a safe place. You can always come to me as a parent. You can always come and talk to me. I will always be here. I will be your solid foundation that you can go to no matter what it is you're dealing with. But as opposed to if our child comes to us and they talk to us about something and we go into a complete shock, automatically, that's it. We break that bond and we're not creating a foundation together as the parent and child. And consider your team's point of view. يعني في كتير أهل بيجوا بيقولوا لي إنه أنا عيا ما تفكر هيك، أما قولي له هيدا غلط. أولادنا are very convinced with what they believe. So in order for us to have them meet us halfway, like I said, أنا ما عم بقول بدي أروح لعندهم all the way. أنا بدي إياهم to meet me halfway. I want to instill my values. I want to instill my beliefs in my child. Whether or not they choose to accept them, that's on them. But I can't force it on them, because when I force it on them, they reject it and they go into a defiance. The more I do it gently, the more I understand where they're coming from and I hear them out. And when I say I hear them out, it's very important. And we'll talk about the importance of actually listening to our children. The more they'll be able to tell us more. And the more they tell us, the more we dig in. The more we dig in, the more we find out. And then slowly we figure out what that middle place is. How do we meet halfway as parents? So it's very important to keep those in mind before you actually start to talk to your children. Some facts, and these are a little bit harsh, I'm sorry, but I do have to give them to you. These are global, these are not necessarily from our region, but what I'm seeing in my office and what I'm hearing from parents, they do align with what I see. 1 out of 5 kids receive pornographic soliciting online. There are 100,000 websites that offer free access to kids. يعني هلا إذا بتفوتوا على جوجل وبتحطوا porn, your kids can access them. And no matter how much you try to protect their devices, they find ways to access them. 25% of kids who have had an incident, whether online or physical, told a parent. Yani 1 out of 4 kids actually came and told parents. The rest felt it was a shameful thing, or they were embarrassed, or they were afraid to tell their parents. An average age of kids who view porn is 11 years old. Why? There are lots of reasons. One of the reasons is because that's when they start to study biology. They study intercourse or sex and reproductive systems in biology. So at the age of 11 is when they start to introduce that. They're interested in it. They start to look into it. 93% of boys and 63% of girls view porn before the age of 18. Average age of first sexual encounter is 16, and this is global. I am seeing it here, by the way, not as much, but I do see it here. Average age of access to the internet is 8. By the age of 8, our children have devices. That's the average age. Is it less or more? We don't know here. You'll be able to tell me when your child has a device. But the moment your child has a device, they have access to that world. They have access to porn, they have access to pictures, they have access to stories, they see it on TV. It's become very normal. When we were young and we saw something on TV and our parents were sitting, our immediate reaction was to turn around and look away. A lot of times today, our children will not look away. They've normalized it. To them, it's something normal, depending on their age, but a typical 15, 16-year-old sitting with their parents watching something. And if there's a scene on TV, they will not look away, as opposed to our generation. We still look away at times if our parents are sitting there. So imagine where our children are and where we are. Among teens, ages 15 to 19, 49% of girls and 44% of boys report being already sexually active. And when I say sexually active, we all know that that's, a very large spectrum of activity, and it can go from nothing to almost everything. So, these numbers are quite big, and these are relatively true, no matter what region we're talking about. So if we look at these facts, how do we create a place for our children in order for us to be a part of this, a part of their world? If they do see a porn on their device, I want them to come and tell me. If they research it, I want to be able to talk about it. A lot of parents will come to me and say, I was doing something on his computer and I saw in his history that he was looking at porn. What do I do? How do I deal with it? I was shocked that my 13-year-old was doing this. What do I do? How do I talk to her about it? What do I tell her? They will do it. It is something that they will, it's human curiosity. It's very normal for our children to look it up. Why do we not want them to do that? Because we all know that porn is not reality, and we want to be able to make our children understand that. And the more we have an open communication with them and they're able to come and talk to us about it, the more we remove this image of, the non-reality that they see on the screen on pornographic websites. And the more we allow them to understand that relationships are more than just sex and what they see, it's about emotions and love and what it entails and how to go about it and when to go and when to say yes. And it's okay to say no. And all the things that we as parents are concerned about when it comes to the topic of sex with our children. What teens say. And some of this is online, some of it that I've heard in my own office. We feel bad enough, weird enough, and alone enough that we don't need our parents' judgment to accentuate those emotions. And Anna, as a teen, when they come to me and talk to me as a parent, if I don't allow them to talk about it without awkwardness, they will shut down and they will not let me in and they will not listen, no matter how many times I talk about it. After that one incident, they will shut down. I've seen teens come into my office and talk to me and say, I do not want to talk to my parents. They make it awkward. They don't make it comfortable. They talk about it from their own point of view. They don't want to see my point of view. It's different now than when you were my age, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And this is actually very important to keep in mind. Monitoring my phone only makes me better at hiding my activity. I've had parents take their kids' phones away. Guess what? Kids use their friends' phones. They find ways to do it on their laptops. They find ways to do it on their computers. They find ways to contact people. So we want to eliminate that. We want to eliminate the hiding. We want to eliminate the isolation of this part of their life. We want to be a part of that world. We want to continuously be a part of that world. So the more we open communication, the more we become a part of that world. Within these conversations, don't make us feel like we have to say what you want to hear. Be open enough to hear what I want to say. A lot of kids will say, my parents talk to me as if they want me to tell them exactly what they want to hear. I don't want my child to tell me what I want to hear. I want them to tell me how they truly think about it. I want them to be able to know that they can tell me anything they talk about. There is a whole new world out there, and that's called the internet. And that part of our world has come in. You know, I've had somebody once tell me, just imagine the internet as taking your child to a building, dropping them off, and not knowing the 100 doors within that building lead to where. That's the internet. Our children at the age of 8, on average, have that access. One button takes them into a door and into a world that we have no control over. And they do know how to hide it, guys. Children are a lot smarter than us when it comes to this, so we have to be very careful. We already know more than you think. Listen to us and be honest. Listen to us. That's very important as parents. A lot of parents who come to me, they'll tell me, قلت لها هيك, وقلت له هيك, وحكيتها هيك, وحكيته هيك. And then when I say, okay, so what did they say? And a lot of parents will say, I don't know, not much. She said very little. So it's very important that, why do kids come and talk to me in my office? Because I listen. I ask a question and I sit there and I pause and I allow them to tell me whatever it is they want to tell me. Give me space to come and tell you what I'm thinking. And a lot of parents who have attended the workshop on how to talk to your teens about sex will go and they'll start to talk about it nonstop. Do it gradually. And we'll talk about how to do it gradually and how to get a conversation started with your child and what tools to use to do that. But don't pound them on it. Don't badger them and make it something that you talk about all the time and every day. Which we all tend to do that because we want to be able to know what they know. We'll talk a little bit and then we'll know a little bit and then we'll want to know more. So we'll go back and talk again and again. The more we do that, the more we create a lack of communication, the more we create this awkwardness within the topic. This is something that we need to talk about from the day they're born until the day that we no longer exist, let's say. We want our children to know from day one all the way up that they can come and talk to us about sex, just as they talk to us about school, just as they talk to us about their friends, just as they talk to us about drugs and food and everything it is, sports, everything it is. It needs to be a topic as easy to talk about as anything else we talk about. We need to remove the taboos. We need to remove the stereotype and the stigmas that go along with talking about sex with our children. Children are having sex. The numbers show it. And if they're not having sex, they're looking it up and they know about it and they talk about it. And we all know that our children are talking about it. The only thing that's going on that's wrong is they're not informed properly. Their knowledge is not the right kind of knowledge. And as parents, our job is to make sure that they understand everything there is to understand about having a healthy relationship, no matter what it is that we want to instill as far as our values and our beliefs. The most important part of it needs to be under the umbrella of creating healthy relationships, whether it be in their teen years or in their adult life. It's very important that we focus on that. And, this is something, if there's anything I need you to take away from today's workshop, is just to keep in mind that when we talk about sex education, we don't talk about the actual act of sex. We talk about the relationships, and we need to normalize that for our children and not make it abnormal. So our children don't feel like, they like a boy and then, that immediately means that, there's sex there, or vice versa. He likes a girl and that means he has to have sex with her. Relationships, and how to build relationships, and how to work on building relationships. And when it is okay and appropriate, according to my values and my belief system as your parent, to have sex. What is okay for us, and why is it okay and not okay? What are the risks? What is it that can happen to you? And where are you? And how do we meet halfway? Before you start, like I said, focus on the importance of healthy relationships. Remember, they already know. Our job is to equip them with the knowledge that helps remove the confusion that their friends and social media is setting on them. Social media is as wonderful as it is because it's giving our children so much more to look for at the same time, or to learn from. At the same time, it is so destructive and so damaging to our children's upbringing. And when it comes to relationships and sex and, and even body image, it's creating something within our teens that's creating a lot of confusion. They're very confused about what is right and what is wrong. They come home, mom and dad say something, and then they go to social media and they see something completely different. And then they get on the internet and they see something completely different. And then they go to school and they see a whole array of differences. So where do I fit in? So this is what I mean by aligning. The parents are aligned, the child is here. Where do we meet halfway and align as, parent and child? Crush taboos and remove stereotypes. We need to be able to crush the taboos. And talking about sex at home is one of the biggest taboo. We didn't talk about our parents' generation. I don't know about you guys, but from what I hear, and whether it be in my office or whether it be in socially, parents from our generation did not talk to us about it. So within our social circle, we don't talk about it. And then we learn, what we see today, what I see a lot today in marriages and couples, there's a lot of lack of communication when it comes to that. So the more I create a healthy relationship with my child that focuses on relationship building and healthy relationships and communication within relationships, and, talking about sex and making it something very easy to talk about. And of course, within my values and within my beliefs and within my norms, the more I allow my child to grow up into a healthy adult and create a good communication with their partner someday, as an adult with their spouse. It is very important for us to do that. And the more we crush taboos today, the more we instill these things in our children. Reflect on your teenage years. Do you remember being a teenager? Do you remember being, 14 or 15 or 16 or 18, whatever it is, the age that you started to learn or see things, because we didn't have the internet like they do today? Do you remember not knowing anything? And this is a lot of times, us as parents, we forget that when we talk to our children, we need to speak their language. We need to remember that they know nothing. They don't know anything. They literally don't know anything. What they know is, this is contradictory to what I just said. I'm sorry. They don't know the healthy part of it. What they know is what they see on social media or what their friends say to them. And that's not what we want our children to know. When we were teenagers, we didn't know what the act was. We didn't know what the emotions I'm supposed to feel was. We didn't know how to communicate with my partner. We didn't know whether to say yes or no. Parents conditioned, they raised us a certain way. What is and is not okay, built on a lot of fear. It was, a lot of our conditioning was, raised on fear, and this is not allowed, or la, or mamnu, which is, if that's a part of our beliefs and our values, I'm not, taking that away. But we need to be able to understand that we cannot approach this from a fearful place. We cannot create fear, because the more we create fear within our children, the more we create taboos, which will eventually, not be healthy for them as adults in their relationships with their spouses. So again, reflect on your teen years. How much did you really know? Do you remember not knowing anything? Do you remember being 15 and 16 and not knowing who to ask even? And, sitting with friends and pretending you knew, but in reality, you didn't know much. So the more we give, we want to be the people teaching our children. We want to be the ones giving them the right kind of knowledge when it comes to everything, and a lot of parents forget that. It's okay to talk to your children that way. It's okay to see what their level of understanding is and then approach them in that way. Okay, so when and how to start to talk about sex. And this is early age, but I do want to talk about this because it's very important for us to keep this in mind. I'm going to skim through these really quickly. From the ages of 2 to 5, a lot of us will use funny words to describe our children's genitals. And that's very unhealthy. When we talk about our children's genitals and our children's private parts, it's very important to use the actual words. I'm talking about the vagina and penis and anus and all these things, because it's very important that our children do not use those words in a playful way. Why? To avoid somebody doing something to them one day, or to avoid, whether it be sexual abuse or any kind of sexual behavior that's inappropriate. We don't want to make that something animated. It has to be very serious, but in a very, approachable way. Privacy. Some parts of your bodies are private. These aren't for the whole world to see. It is very important because children at that age don't understand the difference between private and not private. So we can be a little bit more explicit on that. It is inside your room. You don't do this in front of people. A lot of parents will come to me between those ages because their children will, they'll find their children touching themselves. And that's very normal behavior, because children will touch all, just like they'll touch their ears and their nose and their mouth, they will touch their genitals. And that's a part of their, and they'll notice that there's a soothing effect for when they touch it. And that's okay. They're not, a lot of parents will say, my children are masturbating. What do I do about that? Well, you know what? They're not masturbating. They're just discovering their bodies. So from the ages of 2 to 5, it's very important not to say, no, don't do that. You shouldn't be touching yourself. You shouldn't be doing that. They don't understand the concept of privacy, but then we try to explain to them, why don't you go to your room and do that? Or why don't you go to the bathroom and do that? Then from the ages of 5 to 8, know what words to use, again, when we're talking about our body parts. When we talk to children, try not to use playful words. A lot of times in this age, we'll see children do things that look like, it's very similar to masturbation, and that's fine because they are discovering themselves, they are soothing themselves. As long as it doesn't become excessive, and as long as children are understanding that, at this age, they do understand that there's something called privacy and something called you do in public. So as long as they understand that's something, that we direct to the private. So if I walk into the TV room and I see my child, touching themselves, my response should not be, no, what are you doing? That's wrong, I'm sure, or whatever, which is, with all due respect, not, abnormal for us as parents to do, because it is a shocking sight. It's very important for us to just approach it in a more positive manner, as, I understand that, what you're doing is something that belongs to you, but I'd prefer that you go do that in your room. This is something you do in privacy. And if we do see excessive, self-soothing, then we do need to seek help to try to understand what it is, because some children will learn to self-soothe to deal with anxiety or stress or whatever it is they're going through. And that's the time where, a professional can help us work through that. Again, we're talking about teen years, so I did skim through that very good. This is the most critical age, 9 to 12 years old. This is the age when children are being exposed to it. They're talking about it. Their friends are talking about it. They're talking about their body parts. And this is the time we need to listen. We need to listen as much as we can to what our children are saying. Sometimes a child will say something very, 1 or 2 words, and we can build on that. But it's very important to ask less and listen more. And, a lot of parents will say, how do I start talking? Well, how do I know if my child is ready to talk? By listening to them. They will start to ask questions. They will. I promise you, they will start to ask questions. And if they don't ask direct questions, they'll ask them in an indirect ways. Sometimes they'll ask about animals. Sometimes they'll ask about things they saw on TV. Sometimes they'll ask about something they heard in a song. Sometimes they'll ask about something they learned in biology. We don't want to go scientific. We don't want to talk, we're not a biology teacher here. We want to use that in order to take that into the house and make it more personal. Somebody just tried something. Sure, I'll talk about that in a minute, about when to talk about porn and when to leave them and not. What physical, social, and emotional changes to expect with puberty? We need to talk about that. We need to make our children understand that their bodies are going through changes and what to expect and what will change and how will it change and what their bodies will talk about, what the period is. A lot of parents will tell me, I have 1 daughter and 2 boys, and, we don't talk about the period in front of the boys. Why not? It's a part of normal body developments, and we need to talk about that. Our boys need to understand that girls have that, and our girls need to understand what boys go through. So, wet dreams and ejaculation and what boys go through and the changes in their bodies through puberty, it needs to be normalized. We need to talk about it openly and not in a joking way, and not in a, a lot of dads will say, أنا بمزح مع ابني, which is fine if that's your way of communication, but we need to try to not make it something awkward for them. So the more we talk about it, just like we talk about everything else, the more we normalize it for them. More details about sexual intercourse and other sexual behaviors. At this age, within norms, of course, we talk about what sex is, exactly what it is, what is the act of sex, depending on what the child is asking. Like I said, we start to listen. We look at, we look for cues and how much they know, and we build on that. We follow their lead. I don't want to come to my 10-year-old and tell him, what it is exactly to have sex and not be able to understand where he's coming from, because I want to shock him. He's not necessarily ready for it, or she's not necessarily ready for it. So I listen to them. I assess how much they know, and I start to build from there. But this is a very critical age, because this is the most, they're going through puberty, their bodies are starting to change. They're not understanding what's going on. They need to be able to understand. And it's not a one-time talk. It's not that when the girl gets her period, we sit down, we have a talk with her, or when the boy wakes up from a wet dream, we sit down and have that talk with him. We need to do it beforehand and prepare them for it. Moms can talk about having their period. There's nothing wrong with that. And, dads can talk about changes they had in their bodies, or whatever it is they went through when they were their age. Just normalize it and talk openly about it. Sexuality, it's very important, because this is the critical age when they start to search porn. And I believe I had a question about that. Tell you the private parts in Arabic. Unfortunately, I cannot, but I can send them and look them up. I'm sorry, my limitations on Arabic is a bit. Somebody asked for how to tell the. Thank you, Sandra. I'm sure I can do that. Okay, so if they are exposed to porn or not, ask them. Have you? I've had kids say, why don't my parents ask me? Why do they assume? And this is the worst thing we can do as parents, is make assumptions. Ask them. Do you know what porn is? Have you ever seen porn? And again, depending on what they say to us, we take on what they say to us, and we build on that. So if a child starts to talk to us and we notice that they know a little bit more than they should, or a little bit more than what we thought they knew, then we start to ask them, where did you see this? Have you ever seen anything on the screen? Have you ever seen anybody do anything? Has anyone ever showed you a picture? Our children have devices, so they are exposed to things and they are seeing things. So we need to keep in mind that they need to understand that pornography is exaggerated and it's not reality. And we need to tell them that, sex is something tied in with emotions and love and feelings and healthy relationships. And pornography is not, it's not real. It's not something that is reality. Just like you watch movies, and things that are exaggerated in the movies, pornography is the same way. And we need to talk openly about it, guys. We need to be able to let them understand that it's not necessarily wrong to watch porn, but at the same time, that's not where you want to get your knowledge from. That's not where you want to get your information from. How to be cyber smart and use their mobile phones safely. I've had a lot of kids who come to me by the age of 16, and they've, been, what's the word? I can't, think of the word, but they've been coerced into some kind of a conversation on WhatsApp, and they've built this relationship with this person on WhatsApp, and they've seen pictures and they've sent pictures. And cyber smart is very important. We actually give a whole workshop on how to raise children in the cyber world today. It's very important to keep that in mind, that we need to inform our children that if somebody sends you a picture, don't open it, come and talk to me about it. We'll open it together, we'll see it together. We don't want to make them feel like, ممنوع وما لازم تشوفوها, لأنه we're just creating curiosity. And they are curious little beings, growing up in this world that's so much harder to grow up in than when we were growing up. So we don't want to, diminish the idea that, we don't want to remove the idea that they are interested and they are curious, and we need to allow them. But at the same time, why don't we do it together? Because some things are not real. Some things they're sending you are not good for you. It might not be appropriate for your age to see these things. Somebody else sent a question. How can I get my 16-year-old daughter to open up to me? Her father and I talk about sex in a non-judgmental way, but she seems shy and reserved. Okay, we will address all these questions in just a few minutes. We're getting to that in just a few minutes. Build their knowledge of what relationships are about and how to handle them. Let them understand what it is. A lot of teenage girls, at the age of 12 plus, will come to me, and we'll talk about the ages in a minute, will come to me and say, you know what, well, he said he's not going to like me if I don't let him do this. Or she said that if we don't do this, she's going to break up with me, or she's going to tell my friends. Or, we need to let them understand that what a toxic relationship is, and how consent is very important, and how you need to be ready for it. And you need to make sure that you are prepared to do this, and you don't need to be, told what to do. And you can always come and talk to me, and we can discuss these things. And if your girlfriend said this to you, or if your boyfriend said this to you, or if the boy you like or the girl you like said that to you, or if somebody in school said this to you, just come and talk to me. We'll figure it out. I'm not going to stand in your way and say no, and this is wrong, right, and so on. You can come and talk to me no matter what. 13 to 15. So like I said, the 9 to 12 are critical ages, because they're starting to ask questions. They're more interested. They're more curious. This is the age where I hear a lot of parents are just confused about how to do it. When do what's the real answer? And when do we really start talking about sex? The age of 11. But in reality, I told you when. The moment they're born. The moment they're born, we need to start talking about their bodies, and how to accept their bodies, how to love their bodies, how to understand that their bodies are just like they have an ear and the nose and the mouth. They have a vagina and a penis and a foot and a hand and everything else. Ages 13 to 15. This is when they start to, they're in the heart of adolescence and the peak of adolescence. They're rejecting us. They don't want to have anything to do with us. Anything we say is wrong. We want to avoid preaching. We don't want to give them lessons, whether it be our religious beliefs, our cultural beliefs, and what we want. They don't want to do that. They don't want to hear that. At this age, نحن ما بنفهم، هن بس بيفهموا وما بدهم يسمعوا شو بدنا نقول. So awareness of values and beliefs. Yes, I do want my child to follow my belief system. I do want them to understand my values, and I want to pass over my values to them. But the more I am gentle with it, and the more I allow them to understand that my beliefs are based on love and relationships and managing relationships, and what dating is, and using contraceptives, and when it's okay to become sexually active, and why it's okay to become sexually active then and not necessarily now, or whatever it is we believe in our belief system. It's very important that it's about letting them understand without preaching to them, by sharing with them and listening to them, watching cues. And a lot of parents will say to them, okay, as a question just asked, our daughter doesn't want to talk about it. So how do we go about talking to a child who doesn't want to talk, who doesn't want to talk about it? Whenever I do open up, my child just kind of says, yeah, okay, mom, and then goes to the other room and wants nothing to do with it. This is when we use things around us, to talk about it, something we see in a movie, something we hear in a song, something we see while we're walking. I'll come up to I tell parents, come home and tell your child something like, what, I need your opinion on something. A friend of mine called, and, make up a story. It doesn't have to be real, by the way, and her daughter's going through this, what do you think about this? Is this really what's going on? I mean, is this what your generation is having to go through? Let's open up and talk about that. Can you help me understand, what this child might be thinking? So just kind of role play and theatrical play with children is very important, to open up and just kind of allow them to understand that, what, other people are going through this, and other people come to me and talk to me about it. So why don't you talk to me about it? Doesn't mean that I'm going to go and tell my friends what you're sharing with me, but why don't you, let me understand what your generation is talking about, how your generation feels about this, how your friends feel about this, how you feel about this. Encourage openness and be askable. Being askable is, as non-judgmental as possible. The more we are non-judgmental, the more we are open to listening to our children, the more they will come and ask us questions, and I will be honest with you, boys will not come to their moms as much, and girls will not go to their dads as much, because it is awkward for boys to come to their moms in their teen years and for girls to go to their dads in the teen years. But the more we're askable, both parents, the more our children will be able to ask us things, and I have a lot of girls who feel more aligned with their dad when they come to talking about things, relationships and how to build relationships, because she'll want to understand how her dad sees it from a man's perspective, from a boy's perspective, and vice versa. So we do want to be askable, both parents, very open and askable, and the only way to be askable is just to control our shocking behavior, because I'm not going to lie to you, as a parent, when my children come and say things, my immediate response is to go crazy. But, I gulp it in, I breathe it in, and I ask a question. So whenever they ask me a question, I respond with another question. And then they ask me another question, and then I respond with another question, and allow them to share with me their insights. And I allow them to give me what their thoughts are on the topic, or whatever topic they're talking to me about. And that allows me to understand where they are. And then I learn to build on that. So it's not, they come and ask me something, and then I start to preach, and I start to give them my opinion, and I start to create my own values, and I start to, because that's just blocking it. So whenever they ask a question, the only rule of thumb that I can share with you is respond with a question itself. When a child comes and says, well, Mom, I saw this today, what do you think? Or what should I do about this? Well, what do you think we should do about it? Let's talk about it. Let's think about ways of how we can think about what this is and how we can talk about it. Yes, for example, let's throw out an example. Hey, Mom, you know what? My friend at school came and told me she's not sure if she likes boys or girls. A parent's reaction is typically, no, what have you, whatever values and beliefs you have. So instead of doing that, say, what, let's talk about this. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? How do you feel about this? Where do you come from? And we need to teach our children to be non-judgmental as well. Okay, we do instill our values and our beliefs, whatever they are. I'm not saying that, what's acceptable for me might be acceptable for you or vice versa. But at the same time, we do not want to raise children that are judgmental, because our world is no longer welcoming to judgmental people. So we need to be more open about, what our children are willing to accept and what they're not willing to accept. They can create their own values and their own beliefs, but at the same time, we need to make them understand that everything you can come and talk to me about. It's all about my relationship with my child. I want to be able to create a space for them to come and talk to me no matter what. Discuss respect, relate sex to love, intimacy, caring, and respect for oneself and one's partner. A lot of times children will have their first sexual experience, and they're afraid to come tell their parents, because it wasn't something that was, what was typically, acceptable at home or what they were taught. Fine, what, it happened. Let's talk about what we can do about that. What did we learn from this? Obviously we want to try to avoid that. So the more we talk in advance, the more we avoid that. But at the same time, we do need to talk about respect of self. Your body is something you need to respect. And how do you respect it? What does that mean to you? My is Netflix series. How should I convince her to watch series for her?
عن النتفليكس سيريز بس كرمال الناس يلي ما عم تسمعنا.
Okay. Taking a shower with your 5-year-old. Personally, I prefer not to, honestly, not because of anything, but because a 5-year-old is very alert and very aware of what's going on, and normalizing that at home means that could be normal outside the home. So we want to try not to do that. We want to try to make them understand that there is a privacy. A lot of parents, I'll tell them, wear a bathing suit when you take a shower with your child and do stuff like that. I personally believe that does lead to normalizing. A child does not understand necessarily the difference between you or an uncle or an aunt or a cousin or a neighbor or a friend, somebody who they trust. So the moment I start to do things with my children, I'm going to need to understand that whatever it is I do at home with my children is going to go and be done elsewhere from other people they trust. A 5-year-old does not know how to differentiate what they can do with mom and what they can do with somebody else. And whenever we talk about, sexual abuse, it's happened within, a close circle. It's more likely to happen from somebody close. So somebody they trust. We want to try to avoid any kind of behavior with our children that might, resonate somewhere else with somebody they trust. As far as your child watching, somebody's asked here that they discovered a 15-year-old teenager who saw a Netflix series with a lot of erotic scenes. I would ask her what she saw. I would sit and talk to her, what is it that you saw? What did you learn from this? How much can we talk about this? Tell me what you know, what you see. Should you accept? She's already done it. If she's interested in it, my question is, why is she interested in it? What is it she wants to learn? Are you having a talk with her? Are you having the talks with her? How much knowledge is she getting from the home? Why is she having to go to Netflix to, learn those and watch those and get the knowledge from there? So again, the more I create knowledge at home, the more I create knowledge outside. If she's adamant about watching it, I would tell her, what, can I watch it with you? I'd sit down and watch it with her. I'd normalize her watching it, because I'd like to understand what it is she's getting from this. And while we're watching it, I try to understand what she's gaining from it. And I try to normalize it and not make it a big deal. Because the whole point when it comes to sex, talking about sex with our children, is to normalize it as much as possible and not make it a taboo. So whenever I tell her, no, you're not allowed to watch this erotic scene, yes, it's not appropriate for her age. I agree with you. She's 15, but our 15-year-olds are different than when we were 15-year-olds. They're already, if they're not seeing it in an erotic film on Netflix, they're seeing it somewhere else on the internet. So if you tell her not to watch it, she's going to watch it somewhere else. So I would join her. If she's adamant about it and you cannot convince her, I would join her. I would sit down and actually watch it with her and see why it is she's watching it and what is so interesting, and discuss it openly with her. What did you see here? Why do you think they're doing this? What are you learning from this? And talk about it and normalize it with her. She's obviously interested and she's curious and she's watching it because she wants to learn something she doesn't know. Talk about consent, safety, and boundaries. 13 to 15 is very important to talk about consent and safety. It's okay to say no. If your boyfriend wants to do this, it's okay for you to say no. You have to create your own boundaries. And why do you say no? Because you're not ready. And if you're not ready, come and talk to me. Let's figure out why you're not ready and what you need to be ready for and how you need to be ready. Consent. A lot of children, and this will go on to the next age. Actually, I'll talk about that in a second. Share personal values and try to align them together. As I said before, let's meet them halfway. I know I'm talking very quickly, but I know time is running out. Okay, 16 to 18. This is also a very critical age because our children think they're little adults and they can make decisions for themselves and they tell us nothing and almost nothing about it. So be direct and honest. They're adults, guys. They know everything. They've seen it. They've talked about it. Their friends are already sexually active and they are very aware and they are very alert and they know exactly what's going on out there. So be direct and honest. So when a child who's 16 asks you a question, be ready to answer that question honestly, as much as you can. Dads and moms, when it comes to your children, don't exaggerate the truth. Be honest, be genuine and honest when talking to your children. Make yourself available. This is an age where our children just want our presence. So random times of the day, just make yourself available because children will not come and talk to us when they're uncomfortable. Children will talk to us when they've calmed down and they're comfortable. Whenever a child is having at this age an emotional high, they'll isolate themselves. They'll go sit on their own, whatever it is they're going through. And I'm sure anybody who has children that age will notice that we notice our children's behavior changing when they're going through something. And the behavioral change will usually be, a lot of defiance, a lot of rejection, and they'll be isolating themselves. They'll be on their phones more. They don't want to talk to us. They distance themselves from us. Whenever we notice that, don't badger them. Don't walk in and what's going on? What's on your mind? What's going on with you? Which we all tend to do that because we start to lose sleep. We don't know what's going on with our children. So just make yourself available, sit at home more, be more with them, join them on certain things, go out to lunch with them, pick them up from school one day randomly and go out and have a lunch with them and don't open up topics. Don't ask them what's going on. Just kind of sit with them and be there for them. Let them know that you're available. The more we're available, the more they'll learn that they can come and talk to us. And it'll just be that one moment when they feel that this point of vulnerability when they're ready to talk to us. So the more we're available at this age, the more they'll talk to us. They will not come directly and talk to us at this age. Very few kids will, by the way. Avoid backing out on uncomfortable conversations. So at this age, children will come and ask direct questions. They will come and be more detailed in their questions. Try to avoid as much as possible, avoiding, moving away or, just shutting down an uncomfortable conversation. Just, take it with a grain of salt, sit down, swallow as much as you can and just sit down and think about it. And when you don't know how to answer a question, ask another question, respond with a question. That's something that I've been taught throughout my whole career. Whenever somebody asks you a question as parents, you don't have the right answer, ask with a question yourself. And when you ask with a question yourself, the power of that question will let you understand why your child is asking that question and how much your child knows. Don't shame, blame, criticize, judge, or become angry. No matter what they tell you they've done, no matter what they tell you they've seen, no matter what they tell you their friends are doing. Sometimes children will come, by the way, and I've seen this happen a lot of times in this age, is they'll come and they'll share with us something that their friends went through. In reality, they're talking about something they want to go through or they've been through. So don't blame or criticize or judge or become angry, just kind of sit down with them and say, what do you think about it? We're not here to judge anybody, we're very, understanding of, whatever it is people go through. So let's kind of talk about it. How do you feel about this? What do you think about this? And as you notice that a lot of times when I'm sharing with you, talking to your teens, it's asking questions. The more you ask open-ended questions, the more we understand where they're at in their development of knowledge about sex and about relationships. Avoid making it complicated. So whenever you talk to your child, try not to make it complicated or awkward. Yani don't go too much into detail. They don't want to know what you and daddy do, or what, you did as a teenager, or what you did as a young adult. They want to know, as much as they want to know. So answer the question according to the question. Don't ask too many, don't go too in details. If they ask more, then give more detail. Excuse me. Discuss STD and raise awareness, but do not instill fear in them. Okay. We do not want our children to be afraid of relationships and intimacy. We want them to have a healthy relationship with intimacy and sex in their adult life. So what we do now will resonate or will manifest with them when they grow older. So the more we are comfortable with it, the more we talk about STDs, the more we talk about, what the symptoms are, what it is, how you get it, how to avoid it, how to be careful. Children are sexually active. We have to understand that, at whatever age that, we are in, whatever, culture we're raising our children with, they will become sexually active one day. So the more we raise awareness on STDs, and the more we talk about them openly and tell them what they are and how you get them. And, and some of them, has this symptom or this symptoms, or this is what you feel, and this is how it will feel, come and talk to me about it. It's okay. Talk in details about safe sex, consent, boundaries, whenever you're drinking alcohol, if you're, somebody is doing drugs or what have you, just be careful, because these are things that you don't want to do. So, a typical 16-year-old boy or a typical 18-year-old, 17-year-old girl needs to know that if your boyfriend or your partner or your girlfriend or one of your friends or whatever is drinking or doing drugs or whatever it is, you need to be careful, because this can have a negative effect on you. This can, they can come and, make a move on you, and make sure that you say no, because they're not fully aware. Or if you're drinking, or if you're doing drugs, or whatever it is you're doing, you have to be careful. There are boundaries, and it's okay to say no, and you have to be prepared to say yes. So it's not just about say no, la ou mamnu, or I had one, child come tell me, their parent told them that, they're this jewel, and if they're ever touched, then the jewel is damaged for life, and nobody will ever want the jewel. And, obviously a lot of us parents know we should not do that with our children today, but try not to make it such a, if something happens, it's the end of the world, and, you're ruined for life. But at the same time, how to avoid something happening that you're not prepared for, or you're not fully ready for it, based on a healthy relationship, and based on how to, when it is in a healthy relationship that these things happen. And whenever you're talking to your children, and I say this, and I say it with a lot of importance, a lot of parents feel, as parents, it's hard. It's hard. I have teenagers, and I know, the thought of my son or my daughter being sexually active is something very difficult for me as a parent. So whenever we're talking to our children about something that's uncomfortable, we tend to look away. It's very important to make eye contact, because that creates trust with our children. So whenever we're talking to them, have direct eye contact with them, and maintain that eye contact so they don't feel awkward. They will look away. They will start to fidget and look around the room and, feel awkward about it. That's okay. You need to try as much as possible to create as much comfort as possible in that space when you're talking to them. Approach with the idea that your child may already be active at this age, guys, 16 to 18. And, a lot of children will, say, yeah, well, I'm not having sex when I'm doing everything else, well, that's fine. I need to be able to understand what they're doing. I need to be able to make them understand what it is to be, how to be safe, and what not to do, and what to do, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and meet them halfway, like I said. And when 18, until you're stopped being in this world. I don't know about you guys, but I want my daughter, when she's married, if she's having whatever it is, issues she's having intimately with her partner, to know that she can always come to mom and talk to her about it, or come to dad and talk to them about it. So it's very important to always remember that the more, open communication we have our children, the more normalizing we create, the more normalization we do with this topic of sex, the more we create healthy relationships with our children for later on. I am trying to speak as fast as I can. Is it okay to search in teens' mobiles, or is it invading their privacy? Listen, I'm going to tell you something. I believe that it's okay to search in your teens' phones for one reason only, is because there are predators out there, and I do want to be aware of it. But I do, depending on the age of your teen, I do believe that we need to have our children's consent. We do need to be able to tell our children, you know what, is it okay if I go through your phone? I want to make sure, that nobody's, doing anything wrong, or your Instagram account is not being breached or anything like that, or do it together, depending on the age. If they're younger, yes, I do want you to search on their phones, because they will, be afraid to tell you at a younger age. And we want to make sure. And by the way, guys, somebody asked me, what are the red flags? Any behavioral change in our child, we need to be aware. So if we start to notice that our child is, changing drastically, and there's, a lot of changes in their behavior, they're isolating themselves, their eating habits, they're sleeping too much, their grades are dropping, any kind of change in their behavior, yes, go through their phones. That's okay. There's no invasion of privacy if we're protecting our children. But then do it, with their knowledge afterwards. Talk to them, tell them, what, I heard this or I heard that, or tell them, be honest with them. I was really concerned. I went through your phone. But the thing is, guys, the more we go through their phones, the more they get better at hiding things. So in order to avoid going through their phones, just have a strong communication with them. Just build strong communication with them. Who should do the talk? Okay, so there's no, psychologists say that both mothers and fathers should talk to their children about sex. I want my son to know that he can talk to his wife about it, and I want my daughter to know she can talk to her husband about it. Obviously, I'm neither the wife nor the husband in their roles, in their lives, but it's something that they need to be able to talk about openly. I want my son to know that he can talk to his wife about it, or his partner about it, whoever it is he's sexually active with. So as a mom, as much as I can, I want to try to normalize it with my son without making it awkward. I have a 17-year-old boy. I do talk to him about things, but I do it in a very unawkward way in order to not to make him uncomfortable. Obviously, he feels much more comfortable talking to his dad because he can relate more to his dad. The dad will know how to talk to him, in a more, yeah, me too. Yeah, I went through this. Yeah, I felt this at that age. When they're younger, we can all talk to them, and even when they're older, it depends on the family dynamics. There are a lot of families where one parent out of the couple are more comfortable creating more communication with children. It's fine. There's no one size fits all. However your family dynamic is how you go about talking when it comes to sex ed and talking about relationships and safety. Oof, I've never talked so fast. So to sum it up, focus on healthy relationships. Whenever we're talking about sex education, we talk about relationships, guys. Do not make it about sex only. It's not just about sex. Sex is something very hot to kids, very important to kids, very big to kids, but it's very important that we create it within the realm of healthy relationships. Sex is not wrong, but sex is something beautiful when it's done in a healthy relationship, and a healthy relationship is something that you build with time and you work on. And that's when we instill our values and our beliefs and whatever it is we want to instill. Create a space for open communication. Always, always, always have a place where you can sit down and, talk to your children. My children will come sit with me every day in front of a TV, or sometimes in my room with me. Sometimes they'll come to my office and just kind of hang out with me, and, I'll pick at them. With my profession, it's a lot easier for me to talk to my kids, and poor kids, they're my guinea pigs, as they tell me, but just try to find ways to talk to them about them, use different ways. And I'll be talking more in the next 45 minutes about different ways you can talk to your children. Model acceptance and non-judgment, guys. There's a lot of things out there that our children are exposed to today. And in our upbringing and our conditioning, we find it as wrong, and we don't want it to be acceptable in our homes. But guys, our children will shut the door in our face if we don't become less judgmental and more accepting when it comes to certain things. So sometimes a small experience or a small experiment our children are going through might become something of a taboo if we don't talk about it and we're not judgmental about it. And start as early as possible. 11 is, it's never too late. If your child's already 18 and you haven't, it's not too late. You can start talking at any age. But if your children are still little, start early. Normalize it. Let them talk about sex normal. Let your 11-year-old boy or 11-year-old daughter hear that her sister, got her period. Let them, talk about condoms normally, talk about safe sex, talk about birth control, talk about, what a healthy relationship is, how it is, and, how love is a big part of it, and emotions and relationship building, everything there is to talk about, depending on their age, according to what I said earlier. I think I've covered it all.
يعني thank you. I know it was very stressful, so really big thank you. هلا رح ننقل ما خلصنا، رح ننقل معك. We're going to go to a room بذات التايتل مثل الراوند تيبل. So هلا رح نوقف الريكوردينج. We're going to leave نحن the Zoom كمان. We're going back to the platform. انتوا already على البلاتفورم. Just go to room and there's a room called how to talk to your teen about sex. رح نفوت على الروم، وبقلب الروم you can interact معنا live or ask questions كمان in the chat. You just raise your hand so that we can give you microphone and video. All right, يلا Maya, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm stopping the recording.